Hello, everyone. This is Krishanu, and welcome to the Friday evening show with Amit. Now, today with Amit, we have Valentina. Can we have both of them on the screen, please?
Hello,
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good.
Excellent.
Great. Both of you look great. Thank you. I will go right off to the question. Today's subject is higher education quantum style. And the first question is directed to Dr. Goswami. Why do you think a quantum style education is needed after all?
Well, today, increasingly, the education that people get is really job training. Education, especially higher education, is defined as traditionally removing ignorance from people's mind. And today's education has moved very far away from that. Jobs are not the same thing as the objective of higher education. They could be if they were geared as was originally intended for professions, but that's only for professions. For non-professionals, it's really a very bad situation because we get them into meaningless jobs and geared for consumerism, so they make a living. But after that kind of meaningless jobs, they can only entertain themselves in the evening. They get so tired, they flop over the TV or over their social media or whatever. Entertainment is the only thing they do. This is not human life was intended to become. Human life requires meaning and purpose. We lose considerable amount of longevity if we have no meaning and no purpose in our life. So to me, higher education is that education which brings meaning and purpose. Not only that, tells you how to reframe your mind, change your lenses with which you look at the world, so that you can explore meaning and purpose in your life and be happy.
Now, my question to Valentina, do you think that our education got corrupted in some way? And if it did, probably as Dr. Goswami mentioned a while earlier, how did it happen and how can we stop it in future?
Right. So indeed, as Professor Goswami said, the higher education was defined by the Vedic wisdom tradition as the light of knowledge that removes the darkness of ignorance of the base level human conditions. And then, of course, other wisdom traditions similar in spirit, they discovered and developed the same thing in Greece, in China, in the Middle East. And if you want a little bit of history, one of the shortcomings of the higher or lower division of education was the denigration of the world, a thing which is very well addressed by the quantum science, which, as you know, is the bridge between science and spirituality. And now, if you look around you, education today is more about information processing and job training also, right? And also the social cultural. So that's what we call education today. And human societies today, they are dangerously moving towards the emphasis of survival needs, ignoring the higher needs, and that creates chaos today. So, and that's why it's the job of higher education to restore the pursuit of higher needs and ensure the continuation of higher purpose for human development. Right. So that's why we need the transformational education that will transform the human condition into more positive stations of homeostasis. You hear how we call our master program health, happiness, and prosperity. So more of that. And this we accomplish not only by learning the quantum worldview, discovering who we are and what our relationship is and should be with the environment, but also applying it to live our life accordingly. And then eventually also, of course, transform the society so you can make a living without compromising our worldview and the way we live. Okay, so in the past, again, so if you asked about a little bit of history, so of course, what what means civilization refers to this higher education, and this had transformative power over people and society, and that enabled humanity to overcome initially the limits of these base level conditions. And then together, of course, with ascent and descent, dogmas came in, and the archetypal values, they became more like doctrines to practice, not ideas to explore, to discover, and then practice. Yeah? And these limitations and others produced less and less success in embodying these values or the archetypes. Yeah? And then pretension, hypocrisy became common, and gradually further corruption entered, yeah, due to these unaddressed limitations of the base level human conditions. Yeah. And then human beings without education, of course, they suffer from a base level human condition that keeps us at a level which is quite close to machines, as Amit was saying, and also close to the animal ancestry. And higher education actually is education in human values that elevate us beyond this base level condition. Maybe Amit will say afterwards about this base level condition for those who don't know yet. And then as a result, the society would become civilized, and lower education is then needed to pick up the survival skills to live in a civilized society and appreciate the civilization. But as you maybe see, the higher education nowadays became all lower education, actually. Many educators have forgotten what the purpose of education is, lower or higher, yeah? What being a human is about, what meaning and purpose is of human life and consciousness, of human values, of education, of civilization also, yeah? And this happened because of the myopic way that we look at ourselves and the world today, our worldview, which is so polarized. And it's crisis everywhere. And of all crises, the root crisis is education, and rather the lack of education. And if you look into science, material science, actually, they are openly saying something which is totally untrue and disastrous in the same time. So they are saying that we are doomed to this base level human condition because there is nothing else. And being civilized is nothing but being pretentious, being politically correct. And the responsibility of being a good teacher actually goes hand in hand with being a good doctor, for example. And anyway, it implies something which is called continuous transformation. And then this is holding an evolutionary key towards health, towards growth, towards transformation, right? And eventually, a good teacher is the one that is living what he or she is teaching. And the teacher does not transform you. Nobody can transform a person, right? But what a teacher can do is holding a mirror before you, a mirror in which the image that you see is not the current you, but what you can be, what is the potential, yeah? What is your perfect right to actualize in your being. And then being inspired, yeah, you aspire to transform. And then, yeah, and you got this quantum spark, the inspiration, and the push to transform. And of course, like we speak about stages, we really develop stages in transformation. And the quantum education actually prepares you to be such a person, such a leader, being enlightened by transformation education. And in this way, I mean, if you understand what we want to bring, you will see that the movement of consciousness actually is designed to bring heaven on earth. Yeah. And of course, quantum education, the same with transformation, is not for everybody. It's for people who are resigned to their machine, it's not for people who are resigned to the machineness state, but it is for people who are prepared to some extent, people who allow themselves to be locally correlated, and allow themselves to be educated, to be uplifted and transformed, to not have this resistance, the stubbornness, which is specific to the base level human condition. Yeah. And so this new science, the new integrated worldview, it is a science of consciousness, and it's a human science to begin with, And since this new science is an offshoot of quantum physics, we call it quantum science of consciousness, which restores indeed the human values and higher education. And then with more meaning and power than it ever had in lifting us from the limiting base level existence, right?
Thank you, Valentina, for such a beautiful discourse. However, there are a couple of things that I would like to understand better on behalf of our audience. So we have been talking about, and this question is to Dr. Goswami, the base level human condition. And also, we have been referring to the conventional education system as something not good at all, effectively doing harm to the society at large. So, I would like to understand first what is this base level human condition that is being referred to, and is it that the conventional education is completely bad? Should we completely get rid of it?
Well, uh, the problems are a little bit more difficult. But first of all, the base level human condition, let's define that. That's really the brain. Consciousness uses the brain to express itself. We call it the self, I. Unfortunately, the way the brain does it is through memory making. That's part of making reality. And in the process, consciousness become conditioned, and that's okay. But what happens subsequently is that this ego, constricted consciousness, conditioned consciousness, develops personality programs. Again, because of the brain. It has reconstructive memory. We can change our memory to fit an image that suits us. So everybody tend to develop these personalities, these deception, masks of deception, uh, pretending what you are not. So that causes a further problem. And then we have very much of a dependent on this me that I become, the ego personality. I protect it, defend it. I look for its interest. All my relationship become transactional. What is in it for me? On top of it, from our animal ancestry, human beings inherit this negative emotional brain circuit. You all know that anger, jealousy, all that eventually comes from what we inherit from the animals. Some of it is universal, some of it is personal, but it all pretty much negative. We do have an area in the brain which brings us some happiness in the form of pleasure. But pleasure circuits are associated with addiction circuits. And that is the problem. Pleasure can become an addiction. Unfortunately, pleasure is so built into us that we cannot even learn without the reward of pleasure. So these reward circuits, pleasure circuits, they are intimately connected. And addiction circuits come in, making things very, very complicated. Now, to your second question, is the current educational system all bad? No, they're good in some areas. For example, in the sciences, although the prejudice of materialism is a prejudice, it's a dogma, but the dogma more applies to the human sciences. So long as science keeps it to itself to physics and chemistry, the dogma is okay. When science is applied to biology, however, you have to be very cautious. Molecular biology is totally wrong. You cannot talk about life versus non-life using molecular biology. Life is not just molecules. Yes, molecules are an ingredient of it. Molecules gives the hardware, but life living requires software. And this software is epigenetic. It does not come from the genes. Where do they come from? Here, Rupert Sheldrake has made a great contribution, and I have made some contributions. We have shown that indeed it brings in purposiveness. They come from morphogenetic fields that it gives the organ the software. The software that we build is to be completely experienced. It's human software only experienceable by human beings. Machines cannot help us there. So mechanical picture of it misses all the software except the ones that we already have. But of course, consciously we made it, but now we have it. So the present day science does a hocus pocus, says that, well, the software evolution brought this software, and therefore we just use it. We don't need any more help from consciousness. We don't need creativity. We don't need change. But of course, in the meantime, brain scientists have shown that no, we do change. If the brain changes, creativity is essential. Otherwise, we get Alzheimer's disease at our old age. So, this is the big debate. And eventually we'll win because human being is the human being. Human being, I always challenge the materialist. If you so believe in materialism, can you live like a machine, truly a machine? Of course they can't. Nobody can. So in this way, changes happen and changes can be creative, and creative changes are essential for, as Valentina said, health, prosperity, and happiness. Three most important things that we care about. But they are not about just our lower needs. They are about both lower and higher needs. Especially for higher education, the expectation is not that you can make more money. The expectation is that you are able to explore the higher needs. It requires more preparation, more intelligence, more perseverance, and therefore the testing system that we have, that's not so bad. Because I have noticed that people who come to college, they are more capable of exploring meaning than the lower educated people who stop. So there is that factor. But the point is, what they get, however, these wonderful billion students, is more of the same: information processing, information processing, and information processing. Okay, you need information for carrying out a job, but you cannot use the information unless you learn how to process meaning. Meaning is what brings in new software. Meaning is what brings in the archetypal values in our life. Meaning is what brings in the purpose, along with the noble feeling. So that dimension is important too. And that too we totally ignore when we mechanize the human person. So in this way, we really need to change. We not only need to teach the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. They are valuable, nobody's denying it. But on top of it, we must teach people how to inspire, how to intend, how to intuit, and most of all, how to be creative. And this is what quantum worldview and quantum science are teaching, are aiming for. We want to change the world with this new kind of education where people, when they get higher education, they will not only get an education, something to use to help people, but also will get a change in who they are. Their character will change. Their character will change to wholeness. This is the archetype that education is: invoke, explore, embody. Today, we don't have wise teachers because they are not taught in that way. They don't know about archetypes. They don't explore archetypes. The whole society have become ignorant of these archetypes, the messages, intuitive messages that consciousness itself sends us in order that we can fulfill life's purpose. So all this has to come back.
Perfect. All right. So to sum up, yeah, and to even add a few more things, maybe higher education, so does not, must include not only the physical and mechanical side of the human being, which is the hard sciences, right? Physics, chemistry, technology, but also the non-physical and creative side. We mentioned soft sciences, the conscious side of biology, as Amit was saying, the health sciences, psychology, even economics and business, right? So there needs to be also an attitude change from lower needs to a balance of lower and higher needs. And this also implies a balance of the tendency to remain in conditioning and bring in the tendency for creativity, right? So there are these three of our educational pursuits that have to go under radical change. So first of all, the health science, because I'm a doctor, I have to say about that, it has to restrain its current preoccupation with disease and cure and morph into a science of health and well-being, disease prevention, right? Like preventive medicine and healing, all in the pursuit of wholeness, which is the higher archetype of integration, which Amit has mentioned now. Then second, psychology and psychiatry also, they have to give up the preoccupation again with mental disease and pleasure and abuses and morph into a science of happiness. Okay, and then number three, the economics. They must give up the preoccupation with material wealth and morph into a science of prosperity in the pursuit of the archetype of abundance, right? So you have to see how the transition of all these main areas have to happen. So, and also the integration of science with the wisdom traditions will also restore the credibility of science as well, you know, which you see nowadays, you speak about materialistic science so much. And this science of consciousness, right, it expands the two prongs, theory and experiment, of traditional science into three prongs, which is theory, experiment, and experience, right? So in practical terms, materialist science remains intact under the new science in the fields of the hard sciences, dealing with the non-living, physics, chemistry, engineering. Huh? So it's a science of the domain of the living that gets the revisioning, right? So that's, and then of course, it's a lot. And I invite you really to check our courses and the way we structure the program. So you will see also the higher education features, to what it refers. Again, consciousness, meaning, purpose, free will, creativity, hierarchy of needs, and archetypes, right? So we will be very happy to work with you and grow together with you.
Great. Thank you, Valentina. Thank you for such a wonderful discussion on the subject. And this brings us to the conclusion for this episode. And if we are talking about education, it cannot be without the course that Dr. Goswami is offering, the master's and PhD course in this very precise subject. And this is aimed at giving you the right kind of education, the right kind of balance which is needed in today's world. So if you want to know more, please visit our website, www.amitgoswami.org, or drop us an email at info@amitgoswami.org. We will reply to you promptly. Thank you so much, and see you next week, same time.